Hello everybody and welcome back. I am Prime Spider-Man 76 and today we are going to be continuing part 3 of What If Andy Found Out His Toys Were Alive. It's been around, 10 days since my previous video, which was also part 2 of What If Andy Found Out His Toys Were Alive. But anyway, let's get straight into it. Imagine this. Andy now knows the truth. Woody, Buzz, Jessie, Rex, every single toy he grew up with is generally alive. But here's the terrifying question that nobody ever asks. Could that secret realistically stay hidden forever? Because once even one human learns that toys are sentient, an entirely new problem emerges. Not whether the toys are alive, but whether the rest of humanity is able to find out. And if that happens, the entire world could change overnight. I am Prime Spider-Man 76, and again, welcome to my channel.
Spider-Man.
In part 1 and 2, we explored how Andy would react after discovering his childhood toys had been secretly alive for years. We looked into the psychological response, his moral conflict, and how his relationship with Woody and Buzz would never be the same again. But today, we're thinking much bigger. Today, we're asking, what if the secret escaped Andy's bedroom? Would governments get involved? Would scientists believe it? Would the toys become celebrities? Or laboratory experiments? And perhaps the biggest mystery of all is, why haven't they revealed themselves already? Because throughout all 4 Toy Story films and the 5th one, which I haven't watched, there are dozens of moments where a toy could have been exposed of the truth. Yet, every single one chooses not to. This isn't coincidence, it's a survival strategy. One of the most fascinating aspects of Toy Story is that every toy appears to obey an unwritten law. Never let humans know. What's interesting is that nobody actually says the law exists. There isn't a constitution, there isn't a king, there isn't even a punishment that we ever see. Yet every toy behaves as though revealing themselves would be catastrophic. In psychology, this resembles something known as collective behavioral conditioning. That's when an entire population independently follows the same behavior because generations have learned that violating it leads to disastrous consequences. The toys don't need written rules. Their society has evolved around one universal belief: humans cannot know. What's fascinating is that this belief survives even among toys from completely different manufacturers. Woody believes it, Buzz believes it, Jessie believes it, Barbie believes it, the Green Army men believe it, and even Forky believes it, despite only existing for a few days. This suggests the rule isn't taught by one individual. Instead, it spreads culturally, almost like a language or instinct. What exactly are they afraid of? Most people assume humans would celebrate. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering your teddy bear could talk. Initially, that sounds wonderful, but history suggests something very different. Whenever humanity discovers something completely unprecedented, our first instinct is rarely friendship. It's investigation. Scientists would immediately begin asking impossible questions. How are the toys alive? Where does consciousness originate? Can sentience exist without biological neurons? What powers their movement? How do they think without brains? Could consciousness emerge from synthetic materials? These aren't fantasy questions. They're genuine philosophical and neuroscientific mysteries. The moment Woody speaks publicly, he instantly becomes the greatest scientific phenomenon in human history. Forget dinosaurs, forget the moon landing, forget artificial intelligence. Living toys completely redefines biology itself. Entire scientific disciplines would have to rewrite their understanding of consciousness. Some philosophers could call this substrate-independent cognition. That's the theoretical idea that intelligence might not require a biological brain. Instead, consciousness could emerge from completely different physical systems. Toy Story accidentally presents one of these philosophy's greatest unanswered questions. Can a mind exist without biology? If Woody exists, the answer is yes. Now, imagine Andy uploads a video. Woody waves, Buzz speaks, millions watch. Within hours, people might assume it's CGI. After all, we've seen incredibly convincing visual effects before. But then, scientists verify the footage. Andy live streams again. This time under laboratory conditions. No camera tricks, no editing, no hidden wires. Suddenly, the impossible becomes reality. At that point, this is no longer Andy's secret. It becomes international news. Governments would almost instantly intervene, not because they're evil, but because this is something extraordinary and has global implications. Imagine discovering a completely new intelligent species had secretly lived alongside humanity for decades, and even longer. No government could simply ignore that. They would want answers. Could toys reproduce? How long do they live? Do they possess legal rights? Can they feel pain? Can they vote? Do they own property? Could they be drafted into military service? Every answer creates 10 more questions, no matter how ridiculous they are. Now, imagine you're a scientist. Woody politely agrees to an interview. Everything goes well. Could we perform a harmless scan? Woody agrees. Then, another scientist asks for a tissue sample, except he doesn't have tissue. He's stuffed with cotton. Someone else wants to examine his voice box, except he doesn't have one. Eventually, someone asks a question nobody wants to hear. What happens if we take him apart? Suddenly, the ethical landscape changes completely. Because if Woody is conscious, disassembling him without consent isn't research. It's potentially torture. Modern bioethics revolves around concepts like autonomy, personhood, and informed consent. Those principles normally apply to humans, but Woody clearly demonstrates self-awareness. He experiences fear, relationships, he remembers past experiences, he makes moral decisions. Those are all characteristics associated with personhood, which means scientists couldn't simply experiment on him, legally. He may deserve rights equal to any intelligent being, and that's why society begins to divide. Some people would view toys as people, others would insist they're still just property. The debate would become one of the most controversial ethic conflicts in modern history. Now, let's talk about perhaps the biggest missed opportunity in Toy Story history. At the end of Toy Story 3, Lotso ends up on the top of a rubbish truck. The driver has absolutely no idea he's alive. Then Lotso notices the emergency stop button. Instead of helping the toys, he betrays them. The driver eventually hooks him onto the grill as a decoration. But imagine an alternate scenario. Imagine Lotso suddenly shouts, "Help! I'm alive!" The driver would probably slam on the brakes immediately. At first he would assume someone was hiding nearby. Then he would look directly at Lotso, imagining the bear blinking, moving, holding eye contact, speaking again. The driver's entire understanding of reality would collapse within seconds. Psychologists refer to this as schema violation. A schema is the brain's internal model for how reality works. Objects don't suddenly start blinking, but when they do, the brain initially rejects the information because it contradicts everything it has ever learned. For For several seconds, the driver might generally believe he was hallucinating. But once other workers witnessed the same thing, the evidence would become impossible to dismiss. Lotso would instantly become the first publicly verified living toy. The secrecy maintained for centuries would end because one selfish decision. Ironically, Lotso never does this. Why? Because despite all this cruelty, even he seems to understand something. Exposure is more dangerous than capture. He'd rather remain hidden than reveal toykind to humanity. By this point, we've established one thing. The toys don't keep their secret because they enjoy hiding. They keep it because revealing themselves could change the world forever. But here's the really strange part. Considering everything we've seen throughout the Toy Story films, it's honestly incredible that humanity hasn't already discovered them. In fact, there are several moments where the entire secret came within seconds of being exposed. Let's look at the biggest ones. When most people think of Sid, they remember their neighborhood bully who destroys toys for fun. But from the toys' perspective, Sid unknowingly became the first human to witness undeniable proof that toys are alive. At the climax of the original Toy Story, Woody finally breaks the rules. He turns his head, moves on his own, speaks directly to Sid. Then, every single mutant toy emerges from the shadows. The doll head crawls up across the floor, the fishing rod creature advances, Babyface stares directly at him, and Woody delivers one of the most iconic lines in the franchise. We toys can see everything. For Sid, this wasn't just frightening, it was a complete collapse of reality. Psychologists sometimes describe experiences like this as ontological shock, a state in which someone's understanding of reality is overturned by information they believe to be impossible. Everything Sid thought he knew of the world was suddenly wrong. His toys weren't objects, they were watching him. They had been watching him for years. This raises an obvious question. If Sid witnessed living toys, why didn't the entire world find out the next day? The simplest answer is, nobody would believe him. Imagine Sid running into school the next day. My toys came alive last night. How do you think people would respond? Most kids would laugh. Teachers would assume he had had a nightmare. Adults might even wonder if he had hit his head. Without evidence, extraordinary claims rarely survive public scrutiny. This is connected to a scientific principle known as the burden of proof. The most extraordinary claim is the stronger the evidence required to convince people. And Sid had no evidence. No videos, no witnesses, nothing except his own memories. Eventually, even he might begin questioning whether it really happened. Memory is surprisingly unreliable. Research into memory reconsolidation suggests that every time we remember an event, our brain subtly reconstructs it rather than replaying it perfectly. Over years, even genuine experiences can become distorted. Sid may eventually convince himself that it was just a hallucination brought on by stress or fear. Ironically, the toys may have traumatized the only human who ever saw them. Now, let's move to Toy Story 2. Al spends days with Woody. He carries him around, talks to him, travels with him, stores him in the apartment, and somehow he never notices anything unusual. But imagine one tiny difference. Suppose Woody accidentally moved while Al was looking directly at him. Just one movement. Maybe he adjusts his hat, maybe he blinks, maybe his eyes follow Al across the room. That single mistake would create what neuroscientists call an attentional capture event. Our brains are exceptionally good at directing unexpected moments. Even the smallest motion instantly draws our attention, because throughout evolution, noticing movement often meant survival. Once Al saw Woody move, he would never stop watching him. Eventually, he would see more. And once that happened, Woody would become far more valuable than any collector's item. He wouldn't be worth thousands of dollars anymore. he'd be priceless. Museums would compete for him. Universities would request access to study him. News organisations around the world would offer millions for an exclusive interview. Al wanted the rarest toy in existence. Instead, he accidentally possessed the most important scientific discovery in human history. Here's something the older Toy Story films never had to deal with: modern technology. Back in 1995, security cameras were relatively uncommon compared to today. Now, they're almost everywhere. Shopping centres, schools, museums, airports, warehouses, traffic lights, doorbells, private homes. Statistically, it's becoming harder every year to move through public spaces without being recorded. That creates a huge problem for the toys, because unlike humans, they can't simply explain why they're moving. Imagine Buzz walking across the room after everyone leaves. He assumes it's safe, but a ceiling-mounted camera captures everything. At first, the footage looks fake. People online would claim it was edited using computer-generated imagery. Others would say it was remote-controlled. But if multiple independent cameras captured the same event, the probability of a hoax becomes much smaller. Scientists often describe this as converging evidence. When completely separate sources point to the same conclusion, confidence increases dramatically. One camera could be dismissed. 100 cameras? That's much harder to explain away. Then there are smartphones. Today, billions of people carry high-definition cameras in their pockets. If Woody accidentally waved from a bedroom window, someone might record it instantly. Within minutes, the clip would spread across social media. Millions would watch. Some would call it fake, others would analyse every frame. Artificial intelligence would enhance the footage. Experts would examine shadows, reflections, and compression artifacts, looking for signs of editing. Eventually, one clear recording might emerge that nobody could debunk. The toys have probably never lived in a more dangerous period than they do today. Not because humans are smarter, but because technology remembers everything. This is where things become really interesting. Modern AI systems are becoming incredibly good at recognizing unusual behavior. Algorithms already identify suspicious activity in the shops, airports, and public spaces. Imagine a future system analysing millions of hours of security footage. It notices something strange. A cowboy doll appears in one camera. 5 minutes later, he's standing somewhere impossible. No humans entered the room. No visible mechanisms moved him. The system flags the anomaly. Then it finds another, and another. Eventually, researchers realize the same impossible pattern keeps repeating around toys. Humans might overlook one strange video. Artificial intelligence never gets bored. It never forgets. And it can compare millions of recordings in 1 second. Ironically, the first being to discover living toys might not be a human at all. It could be another intelligent system. After all those close calls, one question remains. How have the toys survived in secret for so long? The answer may simply be they're extraordinarily disciplined. The only way they move, and the only reason they move, is because no one's watching. They're patient, careful, and willing to remain motionless for hours if necessary. That level of self-control is incredibly impressive. In psychology, delaying immediate action to achieve a greater long-term outcome is called deferred gratification. Every toy understands that moving at the wrong moment could endanger every other toy on Earth, so they wait, sometimes for minutes, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. And perhaps that's why their secret has survived for generations. Not because they never made mistakes, but because every mistake has somehow stopped just short of changing history. However, there is still one question we haven't answered. What happens if the secret finally gets out? Not to one child, not to one bully, not to one collector, but to the entire planet. Because if humanity ever learns that toys are alive, the consequences wouldn't stop with Woody and Buzz. They would affect every home, every family, and every toy that ever existed. So, throughout this series, we've asked one question over and over and over again. What would happen if Andy discovered his toys were alive? But after everything we've explored, there's an even bigger question. What if the entire world found out? Not through a blurry security camera, not through a conspiracy theory online, not because someone thought they saw a dull move, but through undeniable proof. Imagine Andy holding a live press conference. The cameras are rolling. Scientists have inspected the room. There are no hidden wires, no special effects. Millions of people are watching around the world. Andy places Woody on the table. For a few seconds, nothing happens. The audience starts to doubt. Then Woody slowly stands up. He tips his hat, looks directly into one of the cameras and says, "Hello, everybody." In that single moment, humanity enters a completely new era. For centuries, biology has worked on one fundamental assumption. Life depends on living cells. Every organism we know, from bacteria to blue whales, is made of cells that grow, reproduce, and use DNA as genetic instructions. Woody doesn't fit that definition. Neither does Buzz, neither does Jessie. They're made from plastic, fabric, stuffing, paint, metal, and rubber. Yet they think, they remember, they feel, they form friendships, and they make moral choices. Scientists would have to rethink one of the biggest questions in existence. What is life? Researchers in neuroscience, philosophy, robotics, cognitive science, and material science would all be trying to solve the same mystery. Where does a toy's consciousness come from? Is it created when the toy is manufactured? Does it appear when someone loves the toy? Has every toy always been alive? Or is there some completely unknown force that humanity has never discovered? No laboratory on Earth would have an answer. This question might sound simple, but legally it changes everything. If Woody is self-aware, should he have human rights? Could someone legally throw him away? Could a collector lock him in a display cabinet forever? Would that be collecting or imprisonment? Okay, guys, I do understand. That is kind of a stupid question, but listen. Modern law often recognises something called legal personhood. It doesn't necessarily mean someone is human. Instead, it means they possess rights and responsibilities under the law. Companies already have certain legal rights. Some rivers and ecosystems in different parts of the world have even been granted limited legal protections. So, if Woody demonstrates intelligence, emotions, memories, and independent decision-making, many legal experts would argue that he deserves legal recognition as a person rather than property. But that creates another problem. Millions of toys are still owned by children. If toys become people, can parents still buy and sell them? Would toy shops have to close? Could a toy refuse to be purchased? The legal system would face questions it has never encountered before. Now, imagine the least pleasant possibilities. Governments around the world would almost certainly want to understand how toys function, not just out of curiosity, but because any form of intelligence could have enormous strategic value. Think about Buzz Lightyear. He's small, lightweight, able to hide almost everywhere, capable of communicating, able to make independent decisions. Even though Buzz is kind-hearted, some people might see him as the perfect tool. Others might wonder if the same mysterious force that gives toys life could be applied to machines. Could vehicles become sentient? Could robots? Could military equipment? Thankfully, the Toy Story universe suggests something more powerful. Toys aren't dangerous because they're powerful. They're dangerous because they are people. Most of them don't want conflict. They want to be loved by their owners. There's another consequence that people rarely think about. Children everywhere would suddenly realise something terrifying. Every toy they ever ignored, every teddy bear left in the attic, every doll thrown into a bin, may have experienced loneliness. One of the central themes of the Toy Story films is that toys deeply value being cared for. If the public learned this was literally true, many people would begin looking at their childhood differently. Old boxes in lofts would suddenly become emotionally significant. Parents might reopen storage containers they haven't touched in years. People would wonder, was my favourite toy waiting for me all this time? Some reunions would be joyful, others would be heartbreaking. After everything we've discussed, Woody's silence starts making much more sense. At first, it seems unfair. Why hide the truth? Why pretend to be an ordinary toy? But maybe Woody understands something that humans don't. Knowledge always has consequences. If humanity learned the truth, many people would respond with kindness, but not everyone. Some would want fame, others would want money, some would want power, and others would simply be afraid. Fear has always shaped human history. When people don't understand something, they often try to control it. Woody has probably realised that remaining a secret protects everyone, not just humans, but toys too. Now, let's return to Andy. Throughout this entire series, he's been carrying an impossible responsibility. He's one of the very few humans who knows the truth. He could reveal everything, or he could remain silent. If he tells the world, history changes forever. If he keeps the secret, the toys remain safe. And it's an impossible ethical dilemma. When people watch Toy Story, they often think it's a story about childhood, about growing up, about friendship, but maybe it's also a story about trust. The toys trust humanity enough to love us, but not enough to reveal themselves. And perhaps they've made the right choice, because if the world ever discovered living toys, the magic wouldn't disappear. It would simply become something much more complicated. Science would change, philosophy would change, law would change, history would change, all because one cowboy finally decided to say, "There's a snake in my boot." Maybe the greatest secret in the Toy Story universe isn't that toys are alive. Maybe it's that they've managed to keep that secret for generations. And if Andy really did discover the truth, the hardest part wouldn't be accepting that Woody could talk. It would be deciding whether humanity was ever ready to hear him. Well, thank you everybody for watching this 3-part series. But what do you think? If your childhood toys suddenly came to life tomorrow, would you tell the world or would you protect their secret? Let me know your answers in the comments. So, if you have enjoyed this 3-part series of answering one of Toy Story's biggest unanswered questions, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and let me know what if scenarios I should explore next. Thank you everybody for watching, and remember, anyone can wear the mask.